Okay, but then you need somehow to be able to become a lending institution to be able to distribute this money, and that's exactly what we see. There's already right now the International Monetary Fund, and that's a hot topic today. Okay, that's what everybody's looking towards for these bailouts. Okay, and what is that? That's a single global entity, okay, to control the lending of monies and loans to the whole planet, any country on the planet, okay? And that's part of the tie, and that's a whole different topic which don't have time to get into, what they're really doing and why they're providing these bailouts, and is basically taking control of their countries, okay? But anyway, so he's got this not only universal bank, he's got a universal lending institution that's already into place. Then but the problem is you got different currencies. So what are you going to do? Well, you got to have some sort of universal money exchanger to be able to funnel this money to different countries, and that's why they already have it, folks. There's different systems. They have these electronic banking systems. One of them is called SWIFT, and it automatically makes different money transactions to different worlds with the different countries, and it keeps it all universal. But wait a second. What if somebody didn't want to go along with this world banking system that the Antichrist is creating? What are you going to do? Well, you got to have some sort of universal strong arm to punish those who don't obey this world banking system. Well, folks, what do you think is going on with what's called the World Trade Organization? And folks, you need to understand that the WTO not only sets the trading rules for the world, but it punishes countries who do not obey what they determine with billion-dollar fines, including the U.S., folks. We are subservient to the World Trade Organization, whether you believe it, like it or not, okay? And then, lest you think this isn't serious, that this is going into a one-world economy, folks, this was the big news, and of course what's on the news again is the euro, but the very birth of the euro should have been a huge eye-opener for us, okay? Because what we saw there with the euro, folks, was for the first time a multitude of nations coming under one unified currency. That was huge. It was like, the sign of the Jewish people, 1948. The people who were not a people, the people who, no people in the history of mankind who have been completely decimated, annihilated, and run out of their country has ever come back except for the Jewish people. In 1948, when they returned to the land, and they not only became a nation, they became a nation in one day, a united nation, and on it goes. I mean, that was a huge, mega wake-up for people. Oh, my goodness, we're living the last days. That's exactly what the Bible predicted would happen prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Folks, I'm telling you, when it comes to this issue of a one-world economy, it's like people don't even sneeze anymore. It's like when we talk about the euro, it should be an impact like the Jewish people came back to the land against all odds. You are seeing a multitude of countries coming under a unified currency, okay? Robert Mundell, he's considered, if you will, the godfather of the euro. He gave a blueprint for a single world currency, including the U.S. and England and Japan, and he stated this. He said, "It is now time and useful and in the United States' interest to move toward global monetary reform and to provide some leadership in this," okay? He said, listen, the lessons learned from the creation of the euro could help move us to a one world currency, okay? And wow. He readily agreed that the United States would probably never go along with this, okay? So what do? Well, it's the same axiom, folks, that they do when it comes to a one-world religion, a one-world government, even the mark of the beast. It's called this. You create a crisis, then you manage the outcome, okay? Get people all freaked out.
Problem, action, solution.
Yeah, exactly.
Problem, action, solution. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Go ahead,
and what happens? No problem. And what happens, folks, is it's just they know human nature. They know us. That people are more apt to surrender their freedoms in a time of fear and or panic or continued crises than in a state of peace. And that's a whole other issue. If you notice that, folks, we don't just have problems. Everything's a crisis. There's a healthcare crisis. There's an economy crisis. There's a child care crisis. There's an employment crisis. Everything's a crisis, not a problem. Everything's a constant state of crisis to keep us in a constant state of not just frenzy but fear so that we'll cry out what they want us to cry out for. Please, government. Please, world dictator. Please, world entity, fix us. Help us, okay? It's the same tactic, okay? It's the same thing when it comes to this one world economy. They are going to, and this is what Robert Mundell said, he says that he proposed that we are going to be forced into it. Okay, knowing that we wouldn't willingly, the United States, go into it, we would be forced into this one world currency. Now, folks, This is what I said. This is why, how could you deny that this is coming to pass, a one world economy that was predicted 2,000 years ago? Because that's exactly what people are crying out for on a global scale. That because of this latest bubble, this real estate bubble, which isn't the only one, they've incrementally been destroying our economy on purpose, okay? They have finally begun to call out for what they really wanted all along. And we have been going along with it. Okay, the United States, and they want to build a truly global society. The former, right after the real estate bubble, the former Prime Minister of Britain, Gordon Brown, he called for this. Listen, an international, he says, the international finance crisis has given the world leaders a unique opportunity to create a truly global society. He says that the Britain, United States, and Europe are key to forging a new world order. This is a direct quote, folks. He said the alliance between Britain and U.S., and more broadly between Europe and U.S., can and must provide leadership, not in order to rule ourselves, listen, but to lead the global effort to build a stronger and more just international order. Uniquely in this global age, it is now in our power to come together so that this latest economic crisis, quote, is remembered not just for the failure of a financial crash that engulfed the world, quote, so that we can together seize this moment. Remember, create a crisis, you can manage the outcome. We can seize this moment together and of change in our world to create a truly global society. Even George Bush, folks, but before he left office, he said that it is essential that we work together because we're in this crisis together, and that, you know, we got to make sure that this never happens again. And so we need to start looking at combining our financial institutions. European president at that time when they first fell, he said we need out of this crisis a new global financial order. Okay, Morgan Stanley chief executive John Mack, he called for a new global body to oversee the financial crisis, warning that it's nothing like we've ever seen before. And then he wasn't the only one. Jeffrey Garten, Timothy Geithner, the president of the Federal Reserve, both recently called for a, quote, new global monetary authority, a global financial dictatorship operating across borders, and listen, forcing nations, just like what was predicted by Mundell, forcing nations and corporations to register and adhere to strict monitoring regulations. Why? Because this is a horrible crisis. It could never happen again. You see that China has been calling for a new global currency, if you guys have been paying attention to that. The proposal is it's controlled by, yes, guess who? The International Monetary Fund. Russia has been calling for the same thing. Russia and China, I believe, just made the news in the last day or two. I believe, and they're trying to combine their currencies with their exchange with the ruble and the yuan, I believe. Okay, but that's not all. You got the director of the World Trade Organization. He announced in Paris, you talk about being blunt with your real plans. He said, quote this, he says, we are drafting the Constitution, listen to this, folks, we are drafting the Constitution of a single global economy. It's in an article called World Economic Constitution. Okay, said this new economic constitution, quote, would govern virtually every kind of business transaction, from buying land to sweeping buildings. Okay, again, none of this makes sense, folks. Okay, and we don't realize the danger of these statements until you look at it from a Bible prophecy perspective. We know the ultimate goal. The Antichrist, ultimately, the world's going to go into a one-world economy. There's going to come a point in time when the Antichrist is going to hijack it, and then he's going to combine it with modern technology, and he's going to be able to control what everybody is buying and selling on the planet. Henry Kissinger, he after this crisis, folks, he said that we can use this to shift towards a global economy, and that, quote, all nations, listen, all nations can now participate in a common world monetary system. Okay, just recently, folks, 420 banks are demanding a one world currency. This is from WorldNet Daily. The Institute of International Finance, a group that represents 420 of the world's largest banks and financial houses, has issued yet another call for a one world global currency. Folks, this is Revelation 13 in our newspaper if you know what to look for. It's absolute wow. And it says this, a core group of the world's leading economies need to come together and hammer out an understanding. Okay, and dated October 4th, made clear that the global currency coordination was needed to prevent a looming currency war. Okay, and that's kind of some of the stuff that's been heating up with Russia and China just the last couple of days. Okay, and guess who's got their feet into it? They're encouraging a return to the G20 commitment to utilize, guess who, the International Monetary Fund, and use their quote special drawing rights. Okay, now stop and think about it. I'll camp on that for a second. It's not just that the International Monetary Fund is the leading institution around the world that dictates and governs and gives out loans to these countries all over the world. That's wild. Okay, but notice the term that they're using, special drawing rights. Okay? That's kind of a freaky term to me, and it's almost always in there, special drawing rights. Okay, now fast forward again, you won't catch this unless you look at the biblical account. Special drawing rights. I could translate like this. If you're not part of our system, you're not going to have special drawing rights, which means nobody can buy or sell without a permission. Is it really? It's the same verbiage, folks, just utilize different words, special drawing rights. You have to go to them to get your special drawing rights, okay? And this is what it says. They're encouraging these world's largest banks, 420 of them, are encouraging the G20, okay, the governments, top 20, to utilize the International Monetary Fund and their special drawing rights. Why? To create an international one world currency alternative to the U.S. dollar as the new standard for foreign exchange reserves. Okay. Also, the United Nations this summer reported they wanted a replacement of the dollar as the standard. Okay, with a new one world currency issued by guess who? Once again, the International Monetary Fund. And folks, this is nothing new on the planet, okay? This call for a global currency has been around for quite some time. There's actually a group called the Single Global Currency Association, and they too are urging the G20 to initiate research and planning for a single global currency, okay? Recently, they met in Washington, okay? And here was their purpose. This is a direct quote. To achieve the primary goal of the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference and the primary goal of the International Monetary Fund, once again, for stable currency around the world. Okay, and then there's people around the world that are supporting it, over in England, over in Europe. Okay, and they basically want to restructure the whole global financial system because again this crisis. Okay, and basically what they want to do is that they're confident that the world is now, because of these crises, will now finally embrace a single global currency. Listen, to be managed by a global central bank with a global monetary union. Okay, and folks, believe it or not, it's happened here in our own country. This association was formed in 2003 here in the U.S. Okay, and their goal, listen, is to have a single global currency in place by 2024. Okay, why? Because 2024 is the 80th anniversary of the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference, okay? And one guy said this, he said, with the expansion and creation of regional monetary unions, there is no question that we will someday achieve single global currency as the benefits vastly outweigh the cost. And he continued, he said, if the European Monetary Union can do what it did for the current, all these nations under one currency, okay, why not a global monetary union for all countries? That's a direct quote. So again, it's almost like the European Union was the big giant experiment. Get people used to the idea of going outside of your single unique country's national sovereignty and start linking with these step by step, add another one, add another one, add another one, these countries all coming together under a global currency and or this local currency in your monetary union was almost like it was an experiment for the ultimate goal. That we're going to do it to the whole world eventually. And that's exactly what they're doing. Now listen, they said the same thing that Mundell said. Quote, this is a direct quote, okay? We shall achieve this goal through education and persuasion, okay? In other words, you're going to be persuaded into doing it whether you like it or not, okay? And folks, you need to understand, this is a step-by-step incremental process, okay? One of the biggest, like we mentioned before earlier, Derek, the signs that we're living in the last days was the Jewish people in 1948. Right. Well, one of the ways that we knew that they finally got us, they finally made a big crack, got their foot in the door big time, that we were ultimately heading, even here in America, to a one-world economy was in 1913, and that was the creation of the Federal Reserve, which is very elusive because it's neither federal nor a reserve. It's owned by banks, okay? And they did that, and you could do your own research on that, by a secret meeting in 1910 on Jekyll Island in Georgia by a group of bankers and politicians. They snuck it in, you know, and but basically it violates the Constitution, which says that Congress shall have the power to coin money and regulate the value thereof, Article 1, I believe, not banks, okay? But basically, that's what it is. It's owned by banks. It's neither federal nor is it reserved. It's owned by banks. Somebody else is controlling our economy. Then, fast forward to 1944, you had the World Bank was first formed. In the same year, 1944,